My name is Kyle Wilson, and I'm from Little Rock, Arkansas. Been a CRNA for probably about 8 months. You definitely find your niche with scheduling things. If you're a morning person, if you're a late person, if you do your best studying early in the morning, or if you do your best studying, late at night. Depends on what your study group also does. So it's important to kind of base your study group off of your study habits. So if it's people that like to stay up for 12 o'clock, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock in the morning because you could get stuff done, then that's what you need to do. But if it's someone that, they want to wake up at 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock in the morning, they want to get to the school early and study before class, then that's what you need to find. I kind of made it work with both. There were some things that during study groups that I would need to polish up on that they knew more than I did. And so that's whenever I would go home later after class or after exams or clinical, and I would do my own polishing. I'd read what I needed to read for myself. I would go over the things that I was going over the next day with my study group. That way you're not just lost whenever, y'all are discussing things. CRNA school was rough for sure. Yeah, so that's one thing about CRNA school that people really downplay is the amount of free time that you have. You're supposed to eat, sleep, and breathe anesthesia, and so there is no free time. You do have semesters where the workload is a little bit less, and so you're able to find, you may be able to go on a vacation, for a couple days where you can go back home, visit family and stuff, but then it's right back up to the school. So it really depends on what year you are in CRNA school. That depends on what your caseload is. Obviously, at the very beginning, if you're front-end loaded, you're loaded with didactics. So you're in the classrooms, you're doing lectures, you're writing papers, you're writing discussion boards, you're taking tests, and you're studying. After you finish didactic, it's really all focused on exams, board prep, and clinical training. Like I said, there are some times where you have more free time than others, but for the most part, you're not going to really have any free time during anesthesia school. My social life were the people that I was in class with. Other than that, you have to tell your family, you have to tell your friends, you have to tell them no a whole lot. You can't go to this, Thanksgiving dinner, or you can't go to this ball game, or you can't go on this vacation, or you can't go on this family trip. You tell your family no a whole lot during CRNA school because you have no time to, do things that are not related to anesthesia school. You lose a lot of time in CRNA school with family, which obviously is a big negative for CRNA school. But once those 3 years are up, it's definitely worth it down the road. It really stinks during CRNA school. The most free time is going to come after you take boards and when you're waiting on credentialing. You go from, board prep 3 months of studying 16, 18 hours a day to walking into a testing facility, taking boards, them handing you a piece of paper and passing boards, to waking up the next morning and you have nothing to do. There is no studying that you have to do. There is no exam you have to be, getting ready for. You're done. And so you have no idea what to do with your time. That's really where all your free time comes. But up until then, nothing. So yes, the day after you pass boards, you have no idea what to do because your life is just completely different from what it was 24 hours ago, where you're so focused on passing one exam to the next day where all the work was worth it. Everything you've put in, your results showed you passed boards, and now it's just a waiting game until you start work. That's whenever most people will take vacations, spend time with family, just because the credentialing process can be lengthy. So that's whenever everyone's free time kind of kicks in. Yeah, so anything that you like to do for fun kind of goes out the window during CRNA school. Obviously, there are people that prioritize just working out, I guess, and that's really good for you in CRNA school, but you have to find the time to do it, and it's not going to be like you did in the past whenever you were in nursing school or, working as a nurse in the ICU, you had free time. As far as mindsets, once you get into CRNA school, it's definitely challenging. There becomes a point where you realize how much it's going to take and how hard it's going to be, how difficult things are going to be really after that first exam, because you're overloaded with discussion posts, you're overloaded with papers, you're overloaded with how many chapters you have to read, and basically how much your first exam is going to cover. And so your mindset changes by, it's either sink or swim. Like, I'm either going to do this or just need to quit now. And so first semester, that first exam, either I've got to change some stuff up, I've got to focus, or maybe you're already in the mindset where let's do this, like just already prepared. I would say the stuff that are more difficult to comprehend, you need to learn when you need to study that stuff. Like I said, if you're a morning person, the stuff that is more challenging to you needs to be done in the morning. If you're a person that, you get more stuff done at night, you can focus better at night, that's whenever your more challenging stuff needs to happen. Depending on who you are and how your study habits are, you need to be knocking out the most challenging stuff while your brain is fresh or whenever your brain works the best. If you're a morning person, you wake up at 5 a.m. in the morning, you don't need to be spending time doing other things. You need to be focused on cardiac. And then once you finish whatever you are for that day, you can move on to the next. But you need to prioritize what you're weak in. And you'll know what you're weak in based on what your C exam shows. It'll give you your scores based on the 4 different subjects, and you'll know what you need to polish up on. Whatever those scores are that you're low in need to be the things that you attack early in the morning if that's when you do it best, or late in the afternoon if that's when you do it best. So if we say the question, what stole the most time, I think of it negatively, like I didn't really get anything out of it, and that's 100% discussion posts. That steals the most time because it takes a good bit for you to do. You have to read article after article after article, and then you have to read all of your classmates' discussion posts to determine which one you want to reply to. Most of the time you're replying to 2 or 3 of these people, and not only do you have to reply to them, but you have to have like a scholarly response. So you have to bring something to the table, whether you agree with their post, whether you disagree with their post, whether there's something that contradicts what they've seen or what they've read and what they've written in their post. It just steals the most time because it takes so much time and you don't really get much out of it. I tell everybody whenever they're looking at time management to really focus on whatever their board prep is and start early. So if you're going to use Apex, if you're going to use Prodigy, if you're going to use Valley, go ahead and get into those programs early on. It's going to make it easier whenever you do start to go into your board prep. So Apex is a very lengthy program to go all the way through, and then you get to your exams in Apex, which are your practice tests, and those don't really cover a whole lot what you see in the content, but more of like a knowledge base exam. And so if it's just something that you've just glanced over these past week or so, it's not going to help you. So you have to get into your board prep early. So Apex, Valley, Prodigy, whatever it is, get into it early. So it really depends. It's patient dependent and case dependent. So if you're doing a very general case, young, adults, you're not going to have as much, to prepare for, especially if they're healthy, easy case. So whenever you start getting into the more complex patients with the more complex cases, so it's really, like I said, case dependent and patient dependent. The sicker they are, the more problems that can happen during surgery, the more complex case, the more things you have to be prepared for. So it really just depends on what case you're doing and what patient you're doing. I would say that on the normal day, you get to the OR at 7 o'clock in the morning. Your first start is 7:30. And so you're drawing up your regular drugs. You're drawing up fentanyl, you're drawing up lidocaine, you're drawing up propofol, and you're drawing up either succinylcholine or rocuronium. You're getting a tube out. You're making sure your machine's checked. You're making sure that your emergency drugs are there. I like to always have some sort of presser already pulled up, and so I'll typically make me a bag of phenylephrine, draw it up in a 5cc syringe, just so I don't have to, rush to mix a bag together or pull up a vial. I like to have all my induction drugs ready and some sort of emergency drugs ready. After that, you can almost do any case. SAM-TIDE is what I went with, and it's suction, airway machine, tape, IV, drugs, and emergency. And that's kind of the checklist that you go down. So you make sure you have your suction. That's the most important thing, because if you don't have it and you need it, you're not in a good situation. So you always have to make sure you have your suction. Airway, your tube, your blade, your bougie, whatever you're gonna need for intubation. Machine is just making sure that your machine is checked, no leaks. You're doing a high pressure and low pressure leak check. Your O2 tank and your air on the back are full, just in case there's any kind of failure. Tape is for their eyes and for their tube. IV, you always want to have a backup IV. You don't want to be struggling to pull out a tegaderm, pull out an IV, pull out a tourniquet, pull out tape and all that. When you lose an IV and you need an IV, you don't want to be fighting to get all the supplies to get one. You kind of want to have the pack made already. And then medications, obviously, is what we went over: fentanyl, lidocaine, propofol, and rocuronium. And then, like I said, I like to use drops and phenylephrine, and then emergency. So you make sure your ambu bag is there. You make sure you know where all your stuff is in case of an emergency. So SAM-TIDE is what I used for lingo to get ready. Thanks for watching. See you next time.